Hi, my name is Joel McKeever. I'm the Student Employability Officer for Trinity Careers Service. I'm also the co-lead of our EDI project team. I'd like to take a few minutes now to take you through the process that we devised within the EDI project team to audit our services and our activities within careers from a UDL perspective, from the EDI perspective, and to see where we were currently doing things well that we could emphasize, where the strengths were within the team, and where we could make some changes which would improve the accessibility of our work. So we started on this project after myself and my colleague and co-lead Orla Tony completed the T-Inc professional learning module. And in doing so, we started off with very much with the framework of the basic UDL guidelines, which you'll be familiar with. Just as a quick refresher to show how this translated into our audit process, we looked at these pillars in terms of multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression. And through a lot of different conversations, we thought about how can we systematically look at what we do within the service and where we are doing this well, how it affects our work. So we took these basic pillars and then we translated it into a spreadsheet, which would allow us to categorize each of our services, each of our unique services, and also see where things overlapped in terms of how every activity goes through our website at some point or comes through our office, and that has an impact on all of those activities. And so we thought in terms of these basic pillars of the UDL process, and while the spreadsheet will look complete and comprehensive as it stands now, how we got there was very much through looking at each of these pillars and each of these subsections and really trying to understand from a career service perspective, what could that mean and how did it apply to our work? So moving over to give you a quick look at our EDI audit process that we've finalized with, I've zoomed out to give you a very high level perspective of this, and then I'll go in and give you a quick example on some of the specifics. But what we settled on was taking each of our activities and listing them out and making sure that we were capturing all the different projects people might be working on individually, what we offer to students. We very much focus this audit for now on the services that we offer students, but we also have other stakeholders in terms of staff and external employers that we engage with, which would be a later part of the process. And after categorizing those services, we looked at a couple of things. We looked at first services and activities, so things you might imagine in terms of CV clinics, interview skills, guidance appointments. And then contact points, which I'll show you briefly as well, which covers the ways that we interact with students, which affect everything. So email, website, in person. So to give you an example here, you can see the three pillars and the sub-pillars beneath them. So what we took the time to do in the team was, if we take the first one here, provide multiple means of engagement, and to try and work on some definitions which adapted the UDL model, which is very much focused on learning and academic teaching, and looking at how that might work within careers. So trying to, between our team, identify what we actually meant by this and tease out some assumptions or misunderstandings and settle on where we're coming from. So for the first pillar here, for example, think about why students will engage with the activity. Do they have the options to feel engaged? Is it relevant? Are they interested? The aim for this is to optimize relevance, authenticity, minimize distractions. Or looking at the middle pillar, provide multiple means of representation. So think about what students are learning. So to understand the context, expressions, and language used, and clarify any symbols or any iconography that we use. And you can see kind of across here, we really went through this process to think about what that means in terms of our work, rather than trying to necessarily shoehorn what we do into a context that isn't fit for it. So I'll take you briefly across just one of the areas that we reviewed to give you a flavor of how the process works. So what we settled on was deciding on who will review the activity. So that was usually the person responsible for the process or with the most expertise on it, breaking it down into what area is it. So this example here is from our employability award. Specifically within the employability award, it's the process where students submit extracurricular hours to get certified for it. And we looked across and we said, from this, what were the contact points for that? So do students engage with career service staff members? Yes. Is it in a physical classroom? No. And do they use our My Career portal? Do we email them? So really capturing where it interacts with our communication methods. And then just take a few examples from the actual audit process. How do we recruit the interest for the student? So initially we were trying to document just factually what actually happens and where there are gaps. So in this case, we encourage students to submit their hours as part of the award requirements. We give examples in a list of what kind of activities might be acceptable. I noted here that the examples are generic and they're restricted to fairly structured activities such as employment and student societies, while not necessarily having the flexibility for things like caring hours or things that might fall outside traditional extracurricular work. Moving across some of the examples in terms of representation, how students will engage with the information, there was some obvious limitations here. We only provided a single template for the students to complete. It was in written format. It had to be accessed through the website and through McKeever. The basic information there, but there was a lot of questions from students in terms of how to adapt it for their particular activity, which indicated that it wasn't really necessarily fit for purpose or wasn't adaptable for students. And lastly, in terms of the output for this particular review, first we looked at what's one quick and achievable action for our service that would improve this activity. So I identified showcasing more examples of different kinds of extracurricular activities and positively representing them and encouraging students to participate using those. We also categorized, what was good, what needed more work, which was critical. And then we looked also at long-term recommendations. So the long list of things, the ideal things we would do with more time, more resources, and what would really get it to a standard we were happy with. Lastly, just to give you an impression of the contact points I mentioned. So we separated these out ultimately from services and activities because they're almost an activity in of themselves and they have their own rules and pros and cons. So things like our physical space, how our reception works as an almost distinct space within our offices, how our website works, how we engage with students on social media, all of these are distinct ways that we have contact with students. And our reasoning being that if you're coming into our office to have a guidance appointment, it's not just about the guidance appointment, it's about how do you get into the building, how do you know where to go, how does our reception interact with you, everything that brings you up to being in the seat, and then how do you leave, that has to be part of the process as well. So after we completed that process and we had the quick recommendations and the more long-term recommendations, we took all that, we distilled it into a document which we shared with our wider team. So our project team had a number of people focusing on this, but then kind of a regular, larger forum. We discussed it, we got feedback from our colleagues, we got buy-in in terms of moving forward with an implementation plan. And a lot of these audit recommendations then went into an actual implementation project plan with owners' specific review dates and kind of pros and cons risk assessments in there as well to reflect the audit results. So there's kind of a 360 in terms of how that's actually put into practice. So that's an overview of our audit process. I hope that's been of some use, and I'm very happy to hear from any colleagues who would like to discuss it further. Thank you.